One favorite way to survey is with clusters. So we're going to use the image at the right here to come up with a definition for a cluster. If you look at the groups, there are groups of people here, another group, a group, a group. What would a cluster be? Well, a cluster's a group, really. And it doesn't mean that the group has to have everything in common. Now, this one looks like everybody has something in common. You could almost say these people have something in common. But there's a mix, really. So clusters are really just groups of individuals that are located near each other geographically or in some other way. Maybe it's a texting group or some other type of cluster where they're all together in some spot. So, what's an example of a cluster in a high school? It would be a classroom, a bus route, everybody together on the bus, neighborhoods, anytime you have groups put together. Now, the way you would draw a cluster sample is what you do is instead of putting the individuals in a hat, you put the cluster names in the hat. And then don't forget to mix well. So we mix the cluster names in, and the clusters could be like classrooms. So my classroom right now is D231, and you could have D232, 233, 234, 235. Throw them all in a hat and figure out which classrooms we're going to sample. So we put all those rooms in the hat, mix well, and draw until we get our sample. Now, as always, ignore repeats for samples. And then here's the difference with a cluster sample. With a cluster, what you're going to do is you're going to survey everyone in the drawn group. So if I pull room D231, I'm going to go ahead and actually survey everyone in D231. All right. Now, why would we prefer this to a simple random sample method? Well, it may be much easier to identify and sample clusters. If I were to have you go into school and say, oh, get me a simple random sample of all the high school students, that means you have to get all the names, throw them in a hat, draw, and then go find those people to survey them. It's way easier to find a classroom. It's like right there, it doesn't move. So, cluster samples are one of the most popular ways to do sampling. Now, I'll do a quick example with the two methods. You're going to survey students seated in the cafeteria. How would you do a simple random sample? Now, I actually did do a survey of the cafeteria in the spring. And what I did, I could have done a simple random sample. And if I'd done that, I would basically number every seat in the cafeteria, have some sort of unique identifier. Then I would put all those seat numbers in a hat, mix it well, and draw seat numbers without replacing to avoid repeats until I get however many people I want to survey. Then I would survey the people in the selected seats. Now, I didn't do it that way. Why? Because the seats kind of move around and it's very hard to get a listing. And not only that, the population here would have just been seated students, and I'm okay with that. Um, but it's very difficult because the seats can move around. So, how would you draw a cluster sample in the cafeteria? That's actually what I did. So, instead of numbering the seats, the one thing that doesn't move around very well are the tables. So, I numbered the tables, threw them in a hat, mixed it well, and then drew my sample. So, I basically went to each table then and I surveyed every student at the table. That way, I went up to him. I said, your table has been randomly selected for our survey, and everyone is invited to do the survey. And so those are cluster samples. My clusters were the tables in the cafeteria. Again, a very good and convenient way to sample if there's no reason to think that there are differences between one table and another.